Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Rogue Ways is back from a holiday hiatus to bring you some heavy doses of love and purity from a hard hitter in the world of speaking truth to power, smashing paradigms, opening eyes, connecting hearts and minds, and wisping away the webs of the stale and outdated modes of oppression that tend to cloud our abilities to remember who we truly are. This warrior of wisdom has been at it for a grip and hasn't slowed or stopped. In fact, he's only augmented his finesse of the finer subtleties of exposing the evils that corrupt our world and our souls, and has created a network of goodness that shines light through the nodes searching for heart in this dark realm. Max Igan, welcome to Rogue Ways. It is truly a deep honor to have you here today.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for asking me. I'm pleasure to be here. Nice to come and chat to you.
Thank you. So before we jump in, I want to remind everyone that they can support my work at patreon.com/rogueways or paypal.me/Corey Sharman. That's QUORRISCHARMYN. And you can check out more of my work at rogueways.org and in the Eyes Open Facebook, where we have curated a lively and loving community of open-minded, critical thinkers. I can't wait to see you around, and I deeply appreciate and love each and every one of you. You are the true power in the world. So, all right, Max, let's start with a pointless question of the episode. What do you think about fractals?
What do I think about fractals? Interesting stuff. As above, so below. I think fractals, I think everything is fractal, really, when you look at it, even when you look at us, break our bodies down to their component parts. And I think it's an interesting concept. I think, as above, so below. Like I said, the macro and the micro, it all works together. I think fractals give a good understanding of that.
I love it. Yeah, I have the same feeling. I like the endless repetition that goes deeper levels. It's always like the same piece repeated over and over again. And it reminds me of the holographic universe idea,
Even when you look at the concept of our history and some of the stuff that's been coming out about giants and all that sort of stuff, and you start thinking about life being as a fractal as well, it's very interesting, very interesting. And it does provide a pretty deep understanding for people. Maybe something that might scare them a little bit to start with, but ultimately it's an interesting way to look at things.
I like that idea of it repeating in history and maybe our personal lives as well, these patterns. So
definitely.
I would love to ask you what your early life was like as a child, Max.
Oh, look, it was terrible. I woke up when I was very young. Like when I was 4 years old, I woke up to the fact that something was terribly wrong. I had a pretty rough time from there because I just couldn't understand anything that was going on. And I hated my school. I hated everything about it. I hated what they were teaching me. When I was old enough to question it, I did, and I argued with all my teachers all the way through high school. I got kicked out of 4 high schools.
Wow.
But as a child, as a small child, my only real friend was my teddy bear, and I used to walk around asking him to please tell God that I'd been born onto the wrong world, and could he please take me off this world and put me where I was supposed to be, because this world was a madhouse where people thought they could own land. And I thought the whole thing was terrible. So it was pretty rough childhood. I mean, I woke up very, very early. So I found a way of kind of living on the outside of society. Became a musician at a very early age. As soon as I heard music when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I knew I wanted to be a musician. That was a way out. And so that's what I did. And it was interesting because that provided me a lifestyle where I only had to work really, a maximum of 5 to 10 hours a week on stage. And the rest of the time I was free to explore all the stuff I wanted to explore, and I got paid to travel all around the place just playing guitar. And if I wasn't doing that, I would have been sitting at home playing guitar. So it all worked out pretty well, So that's what brought me to where I was. But I never planned on doing what I'm doing now or any of this stuff. But my lifestyle and my questioning nature at an early age just kind of led me to this. And I've managed to spend 61 years living on the outside of society and gotten away with it. So, it sort of worked out in the end, but it was a rough, rocky road to get here.
Yeah. Well, I seem to see this pattern repeating like a fractal, maybe, that like people who are kind of find themselves on the outskirts had that same type of feeling as a child, like didn't understand anything. And it's almost like seems obvious to them. Like, why are you guys doing things like this? Nothing you're doing is right. And feeling really out of place and like they're maybe like an alien on a foreign world or something. So it's interesting to keep hearing that over and over again. Because definitely not everyone had that, but I feel like people like us tend to.
A lot of kids do. I mean, we say the wisdom of babes, the wisdom of children, and we make it as this. Oh wow, the wisdom of children. It's just the obvious. They're stating the obvious. Why don't adults think this way? It's pretty simple. The world's pretty corrupt, and it's only corrupt because we comply with it and we go along with it. So it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's not really the wisdom of children at all. It's just that it's the programming of adults, really.
That's interesting. So really, like, it's more common that people have that, but it's just kind of beaten out of them, beaten into submission, indoctrinated away.
Yeah, through the school system. I think one of the best things people could do to change the world is pull their kids out of this scholastic system and create their own scholastic system. Get them out of this government-controlled education system, because it's not educating them. It's dumbing them down. It's indoctrinating them into a life of slavery and a life of authoritarianism. It's not teaching them any life skills. It's teaching them false history. It's teaching them completely false reality. That would be the best, most progressive thing people could do to implement change in the world. Stop complying with their own slavery and pull their kids out of this education system, irrespective of what the government writes down on paper, which claims you can't do so.
Hey, I think it's like a badge of honor that you got kicked out of 4 high schools, because they're just little slave camps where we're just reinforcing all of the worst possible ideas about the world.
Well, they are. I used to argue with my teachers all the time, especially in history and social studies and these sort of classes, because, they'd try to present a concept to me. And I'd say, well, hang on, I've just read a book about that whole concept. And what you're teaching us is the most commonly accepted theory. And perhaps you should be giving us all the theories and opening it up for discussion and letting us make our own mind up. I mean, that'd be real education.
That would be.
And they didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. So, I ended up with my own desk outside the principal's office for my last 6 months of high school. And I just thought, what am I doing here? And I walked out halfway through my exams and never looked back. Like halfway through my 3rd year of high school, I walked completely away from the education system. And people even say to me now, well, you're so articulate and so knowledgeable. Where were you educated? I go, well, I wasn't. They never got hold of me. That's how come I know all this stuff.
That's why, yeah.
Yeah, you just got to be able to think for yourself. If that's what the education system does. It prevents people from thinking for themselves. It trains you to think in a certain way and to adhere to certain laws and certain rules and certain regulations, which they call laws, rules, and regulations, but it's just stuff they make up themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All people's concept of reality has got to fit within this little scientific box, and it's rubbish. It's all rubbish, and it's gotten to the point, it's so bad that, if you want to find the truth about something, all you really have to do is look for a government study on the topic and go in the opposite direction of what the government's telling you. And that's where you're going to find the truth. That's how bad and backwards everything's become. You can use that as a rule of thumb for truth searching. Just look at what the government says and then go the opposite way.
Truly. Well, I bet you questioning those teachers and their probably very negative reaction to being questioned maybe caused some other people around you to wake up a little bit. So that's kind of a beautiful side effect too. It exposes it.
It is good. I mean, it did happen to a degree, but not really until years later. I've actually had people that I've met since leaving high school that I ran into like 35 years, 40 years later, and they've gone, wow, everything you used to say in high school, it's exactly how the world is now. How did you know? And so they're kind of coming back now in later life and saying, wow, that kid at school, that rebellious kid at school, everything he said has come to pass. So, so I've been on this road for a very, very long time. Like, since I was 8, when I was 8 years old, I started researching the pyramids, and it kind of progressed from there. So, it's been like a 40-year journey for me, 40 or nearly 50-year journey.
Well, that's another commonality I see a lot of people have, that the pyramids or Orion or Egypt was something about their awakening. It's like triggered something in them. And I wonder do you have any ideas on that?
Well, it's just a mystery of this device and all of the coding, contained within the pyramid, and being told that we don't know how they did it. To me, that was a really interesting thing, and you get to the point where you find out how they did it. You find out the pyramids were poured. They even told you they were poured on. There's a stele near Zaire in northern Egypt, a place called Elephantine, and it's called the famine stele, and it tells you how to dissolve limestone, get soluble limestone, dissolve it in water, mix it with aggregates and crushed shells, and create blocks and all this sort of stuff. It tells you how to do it on this stele. So that's how they built the pyramid. They were
I've
poured. They
never
were
heard
poured like
that.
concrete. They were poured like concrete.
Wow.
But like, I mean, it tells you in this steel. They just say, "Oh, this is an insignificant steel. It doesn't mean anything. It's not part of regular Egyptology." But it's right there telling you how they did it. And it
Wow.
even mentions the building of 3 monuments. One was built to the god Kuman. One was built for, um, I think, Zoroaster. I don't know. I mean, I'm clutching at straws here. I've forgotten
Yeah.
who these. I know one was built for Kuman, and I can't remember who the other 2 were built for. But it tells you so. But once you start getting into that, and you realise that there's monuments and artifacts lying all over the world, and you start finding out things, and you think, well, hang on, why aren't they looking at this? Why aren't they talking about this? And you start to realise that it applies to all the other stuff as well, and that it's actually, they can't have missed it. It has to be a cover up. So
Yeah.
then you start looking into cover ups, and then that leads you into the whole UFO rabbit hole and the whole ET rabbit hole and all that sort of stuff. And then again, you realize it's about cover ups.
Mm.
Then you realize it's all about government cover ups and it's all about government corruption. The whole thing exists because of this corrupt system. So once you start really looking into the pyramids, you realize that they can't have just missed all this stuff. It's been a
No.
deliberate obfuscation of the truth. And so you start questioning why the cover up exists. And then you realize that the whole thing's a cover up. The whole thing's a charade. We've got a world here that's being run by one worldwide crime family that's masquerading as government, that is manufacturing all of these wars against each other, and it's all about destroying the past, destroying infrastructure. I've really been coming to the conclusion lately that all the wars that have been fought since the Napoleonic War, and maybe even before then, are all the one war. It's the one war that's been going on for 200 or 300 years, and it's about destroying the old world, destroying all the old infrastructure, and replacing it with the new world. The revelation that history has changed, the revelation of the nation of Tartaria that once existed in Europe, how this was a worldwide culture, the concept that we had free energy, all sorts of stuff is all coming to light now. And there was something that happened. There was a cataclysm that happened early in the 1800s, which completely changed the face of the world, changed the face of Europe, changed the face of the United States, changed the face of a lot of places. And there's no denying that this happened. I mean, people may deny it. They'll say, well, it's not in the history books, and we'd know, and there'd be this, and there'd be evidence, there'd be people that have got records or whatever. But if you've
Right.
got vast amounts of population wiped out, well, those population that are left are going to believe whatever history is fed them. And when I look at the changes that have happened to the world just in my generation, just in my 60 years of being here, what I was taught as a kid and what the kids are being taught at school now, it's very different to what I was being taught when I was at school. And that was wrong then.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely off the charts now. It's completely backwards to what people should be learning. So you begin to see how easy it would have been for them to do this. And
Hmm.
another really interesting thing is that most of the forests in the world are only 200 years old. There's a few old trees. I mean, there's older trees. There's the sequoias in California. There's certain trees that are old, but all of these trees are catalogued. They're all marked. They
Yeah.
know where all the old trees are. Who even went and did that? Who went and marked and catalogued all those trees around the world? How did they manage to
Right.
do that? And why did they do that? And
Right.
why are none of the other trees any older than 200 years old? The forests just aren't any older than 200 years old on most of the earth. Most of the Amazon is not even any older than 200 years old, a lot of those trees.
Huh.
So what happened to all the old growth trees? What happened to all this so-called virgin forest? Some of the old maps of California that show California as an island, that show a great inland sea in the United States and a river flowing down to near California, near the California-Mexican border, or even down into Mexico. Now, all sorts of stuff like this, it's all changed in the last couple of 100 years. And you can find maps that show it and talk about all this sort of stuff. So why aren't we taught any of this in our history books? Nothing makes sense. So there's been a lot of stuff coming out recently, and to me, it's incredibly empowering to realize that just 200 years ago, we were in a very, very different world. We were in a world that had a peaceful culture where we all got along, we all respected each other's individual cultures, and everything, all the wars and the conflicts and all this stuff have been contrived, and it's all this battle for energy.
Yeah.
Everything we do is to secure energy and resources for ourselves, so we'll be safe. But if we had free energy, we wouldn't have any of these wars. There'd be no reason
Yeah.
to go to wars with people. We'd be creating things and experiencing each other's culture, and it was always like that. Yeah, even when I was a kid, the movies of the Arabs and the snake charmers and all this sort of stuff, Persia, it
Yeah.
was never there was no Islamic extremism.
Yeah.
It was just 40 years ago. It was all wonderful, the Middle East. You wanted to go there to experience Persians and to experience all of that culture and all the genies in the bottles and all of that wonderful stuff that we had when we were kids and told about all this stuff. Now what do
Right.
you got? You got ISIS, Islamic extremism and all this stuff. It's all been contrived. The whole thing's been contrived. So it's understanding that and realizing that it's, your government is not your friend, and it doesn't matter what country you're in, they all work together. Who wants
Yeah.
to be the enemy this week? Who wants to, if they really wanted to take out Assad, if the war in Syria was real, why have they turned the whole country to rubble and bombed everybody except Assad?
Right.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. The same in World War II. They turned Germany to rubble, bombed Dresden to rubble, turned London to rubble. They didn't hit the government buildings in any of the countries. I thought the two governments were at war with each other, so we'll kill everybody else except the government.
Right.
It's a joke. The whole thing's a scam, and they all work together to do it.
So what do you think happened 200 years ago that caused like the forests to die and the globe to be reconfigured and us to forget?
There was a cataclysm of some sort. What caused it, we're trying to figure out. I mean, this has been
Yeah.
expunged from history, but the concept of the mud flood, we're
Hmm.
calling it a mud flood for want
Right.
of a better word. We don't know what caused it. We don't know where it came from. It could even be what is referred to as the biblical flood. Perhaps the biblical
Right.
flood wasn't thousands of years ago. Perhaps it was 200 years ago.
Hmm.
All we know is that which exists in living memory. That's all we know. The rest of it is just hand-me-downs and stuff that's written in history books, all of which are wrong and have been falsified.
Yeah.
I was mentioning on the last show, we go to learn all these things in a library. Why do they call it a library? Maybe it's because it's full of lies. It's a library. Everything they tell us is lies. Remember in World War II, well, it was the Axis and the Allies, and everything we were told about World War II was all lies, and that's the Allies, all lies.
Oh.
They tell us what they're doing with the language. So, what caused it is a great question. I mean, I don't know, but there's some people that are suggesting there was an event that happened around the 1600s. And there appears to have been another event that happened around the early 1800s as well. Another interesting thing that I saw on a video someone sent me a link to is the fact that if you look at the history, the official history of virtually all countries, you'll find that there was a change of power that happened. The government was overthrown and a new government came into place circa 1790 to 1815. Right around the world, mainly around about 1812. A lot of countries, it all changed in 1812. The government was deposed and a new government was put in. Revolution, people's revolutions or great fires or whatever. But it essentially happened in every country right around the world within this whole 20-year period to 25-year period. All of the governments were changed over. So that's an interesting thing as well.
Yeah.
And even looking at the Napoleonic War, there's actually a medallion. We're told the Napoleonic War fought between Russia and France. Napoleon marched into Russia and fought with Alexander I. But there's actually a plaque you can find. If you search for it, you'll probably find it. It's a copper or bronze plaque, like a medallion or a medal. It's a square one, and it's got a picture of Napoleon on one side and a picture of Alexander on the other. And it's got a inscription on it which basically says, "In unity there is strength." Okay, so this is a medallion depicting an alliance between Napoleon and Alexander I, which is a strange thing. We're told they were fighting in that war. And when you look at Moscow, Moscow is an incredible city. The architecture in Moscow is absolutely amazing. This is a Tartarian city.
Yeah.
You can look at it, the delicate nature of that architecture. This is Tartarian. And why did Napoleon march from France? Why did he march straight to Moscow when he had to march past St. Petersburg to get to Moscow? And St. Petersburg was apparently the capital of Russia. Why did he march past the capital to attack Moscow? Because I would suggest he marched past the capital to attack Moscow is because he marched to St. Petersburg. He joined up with the army of Alexander and they marched together to fight Moscow, which was a Tartarian city at the time.
Interesting.
And the so-called war between France and Russia was actually a war of France and Russia against Tartaria, and they just eliminated the real enemy from the history books and said, oh, it was these two nations fighting each other, which provided the cover story they needed for all the conflict that happened and blah, blah, blah. But I would suggest that it was an alliance between those two countries to attack Tartaria, or whether the war might have already been ongoing. I mean, we don't know, but I would suggest that's what that was, and that's why that medal and that medallion exists. So, everything we're told is wrong. It's a hard thing for people to come to terms with and come to grips with. It's a bitter pill to swallow. But when you start looking at the physical evidence, and you start and you factor in the reality that Tartaria was there, it was a worldwide culture. There's even a CIA document which talks about the rewriting of history as recently as 1944. Wow. There's a document called Communism. I'll find it for you, and I'll find the name of the document for you. It's called no, it's called National Cultural Development under Communism. If you do a search for it, it's a PDF, and it was released in from a meeting in 1957, and it references an event that happened in 1944, which was a meeting like in 1944. That's the end of World War II. And it talks about the deliberate, it's the CIA saying, oh, how bad the Russians were and how they've done all this terrible stuff, because everyone's always trying to shift blame.
Always the Russians.
But what it talks about is the Tatar history was to be rewritten and falsified in order to eliminate references to greater Russian aggression. Wow. So it talks about the rewriting and falsification of Tartarian history as recently as 1944. Okay. And Tartaria is a country nobody's even heard of, so... and it's there, all there in their official documents, how they did this. So, wow. Probably gone a massive
pretty good
tangent.
Evidence. No,
but
I mean, exactly
there's all sorts of evidence that it exists, and it exists on every map that you'll find pre-1850 as well. You can even find, if you go and search for military flags or naval flags or just national flags circa 1850, look for U.S. flag books, and you'll find in U.S. flag books, this place that they say wasn't a country, was just a tract of land. You'll find U.S. flag books, and they've got Tartarian flags in there as recently as 1850. There's one with an owl and one with a griffin, right there next to the U.S. flag. It's there in the same books. So this was a real country. It was a real place. It's been expunged from history, and understanding what this country was and finding out the true history of this country, I think, is a key that will lead to freedom for all of us, because once we understand just how much our history has been falsified, how much we've been played off against each other, perhaps things will change. And again, even the concept that we had free energy 150, 200 years ago, this is immensely empowering.
Yes. And it fits perfectly with every single person who seems to find a key to what might become free energy, seems to mysteriously have their lab burnt down or destroyed or get killed, or they commit suicide suddenly. And so it's definitely what they're trying to stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Funny that. Another really interesting character that I've found on YouTube is a guy called Dane Calloway, and he's put forth a very, very interesting hypothesis. I'm still looking into it, but I find that there's probably a lot of credence in what he says, is that the fact that the slave trade has been falsified, the whole slave operation has been falsified. There were no black slaves brought to the United States from Africa. If you go to Virginia and look where the first slave ship apparently landed, it talks about 20-odd Negroes arriving. That's all it was 20-odd Negroes. And if they changed the signs, there's a clip that he did, and he shows. He went there and he photographed the sign in 1995. It changed in 2002, then again in 2005, then again in 2015. These signs keep changing. But when the original 20-odd Negroes arrived, and that's what they're listed as, 20-odd Negroes arrived from this Portuguese ship. They were taken off a Portuguese ship and they were brought to America, and they weren't slaves when they arrived, and a lot of the black people in the United States are actually Aboriginal Americans. They're Americans. They're Native Americans. Wow. And there were people of different races all around the world. living within Tartaria and within these different cultures. And, you know, people used to embrace each other's cultures and travel between each other's cultures, but they didn't want to overtake each other's cultures.
Yeah.
You want to come to live in United States and form Chinatown.
Yeah.
If you want to have Chinatown, you do that in China. You want to come to the
Right.
United States, you want to become an American and experience the American culture, maybe take elements of that back to China with you. But
Right.
there's no need to create this little sectarian area
Yeah.
because we're all getting along. You know, and even when you look at, I mean, everything is so backwards. If you consider the possibility, and I've said on other shows that it appears that all the religions work together and we're all tolerant of each other as well. I've had a massive amount of outcry about that. It seems that a lot of
Really?
Christians cannot stand the idea of not hating Islam. I don't know how that's very Christian of them, but
weird idea. Yeah.
it's a weird idea, you know. So, oh no, that's Satan. That's Satan. Well, you know, maybe it's not. Maybe the Quran and the Bible are simply chapters of the same book that were split up and the people put against each other. And the concept of Genghis Khan, even when you look at Genghis Khan, I've got a friend staying in Mongolia at the moment, and Genghis Khan in Mongolia, they refer to him as Genghis Khan, they call him. And Genghis Khan is like Genghis Khan. Khan means emperor, king, and Genghis Khan is the emperor of emperors, the king of kings. Where have we heard that before? The king of kings.
Very
Interesting
religious
concept, isn't it? When you look at Genghis Khan's father, which you can find the name written in Russian and you put it into Google Translate, it comes up as hero of Jesus. So.
Wow.
And when you talk to the people in Mongolia and you look at the concept that Mongolia was part of Tartaria and all the religions work together, and they all, if you look at the Quran, the most revered prophet in the Quran is Isa, who is Jesus. It's the same character. They're waiting for the return of this guy, same as the Christians. They're all waiting for the return of the same guy. It's all about the same guy. All these religions all talk about this same guy. They just have a different name for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always said to people that what Christ wanted people to do was to walk his path, not wait for him to come back and save you. Do what he did. He showed you the path to freedom. All you've got to do is stop complying with it and know what you are. That is the way, and he is the way. But people, well, he is the way, so I just have to believe in him and then keep doing all this shit and just complying with all this rubbish and being a completely corrupt person, dealing with the corrupt stuff by default, and he's going to come back and save me because I believe he's going to come and get me out of this mess. No, he showed you how to get yourself out of the mess if you only would choose to do it. And when you look at that concept, Genghis Khan was the most Christ-like of all the people. That's why he was elevated to that king of kings, that one who was to the leader of the country. So, we're taught, no, he was a vicious Mongolian warlord who brutal.
Right.
And evidence would suggest that it was actually quite the opposite. You know, the Mongolians say it was quite the opposite. And when you look at the Tartarian king lists, you find that it's all descendant from Genghis Khan.
Really?
So, yeah, that's an interesting thing as well. So, and that's another thing. There's a Mongolian king list. It's like a family tree of emperors from Tartar. I mean, if this was not a country, why is there a king list of all this stuff? How does any of this stuff exist? So, but thinking about that concept of all the faiths working together and the most Christ-like person within the country, the one who embodied that more than anything, was elevated to the position of the King of Kings, to the Genghis Khan, to, you know, and the battle, you know, we're taught, if you look at the history of Khazaria, which is another country that's been expunged from history, which is where the Jewish converts came from and all of that sort of stuff. And where it's reported that Khazaria was actually overthrown by Genghis Khan's hordes. Well, perhaps this was where the war against Tartaria comes into it, or perhaps that was all about the war for Tartaria as well. Perhaps it was the Khazarians that were doing it. Perhaps Khazaria was defeated. They infiltrated into the other countries, and that's who attacked Tartaria. And then perhaps whatever happened in the 1800s when this cataclysm happened, it just provided the opportunity for these people to just go in full sway and just wipe everybody else out, teach them a false history over a couple of generations, and here we are. You know, I mean, how it happened, we don't know. That's just a hypothesis, what I've just said there.
Right.
And I don't even know what I've said about Genghis Khan then. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying this is what is suggested. when you look at the evidence and you look at the translations of the words and you look at the history of Mongolia and that sort of stuff. Even the Great Wall of China. Look at the Great Wall of China. This wasn't built by the Chinese. If you look at the Great Wall of China, all the gates to enter the wall are on the Mongolian side. So why would the Chinese do that? We'll build this big wall to protect ourselves, and we'll give the other guys on the other side of the wall the way to get in and get up on top. It doesn't really work. So this wall was very likely built by Tartaria to keep the Chinese hordes out. And there's also something that I mentioned which caused a lot of controversy a few shows ago, was saying that the original samurai were not Japanese. They were remnants of Tartarian civilization that fled to Japan. This is actually supported by oral traditions in Japan as well. A lot of the young Japanese people won't believe it. They treasure this whole samurai thing as being our heritage, you know, because they're trained to think that way. The same as the Egyptians cherish the pyramids as being their heritage, because look what we did, great, you know, but they didn't. And it's the same with the samurai. These appear to be the last warriors of Tartaria, which fled to Japan. And I'll dig up a letter which I'm going to read on the radio show sometime soon to won't confirm it, but to support that hypothesis, which was sent to me by someone. Cool. So yeah, it's quite interesting when you really look at it. But everything is different. Everything is wrong. Our history is completely fabricated, like all of it. Not just some of it is fabricated. And even that they've moved countries around and changed histories around, taken little bits of this and put it there, and you know. Something I often like to bring up is the fact that Ulysses called the island of England Syria. And yeah, that's what he referred to as Syria. He said he used to sail to a green island in the west called Syria from Greece, you know, green island west of Greece. There's only one green island west of Greece, and that's England. And that's Syria, and people suggest that's where Surrey gets its name. And another interesting thing about Syria is that if you look through Syrian history, you'll find the story of King Arthur in there. I mean, they've all got different names. But there's this one king who had the same amount of children, whose children married the same amount of people, and it's all the same story. Only it's been taken from Syrian history and been created as a British myth. You know, so they've borrowed and changed everything. We don't know where anything is. Even Velikovsky, who's put out, not Velikovsky, Fomenko, Anatoly Fomenko, who's put out the new timeline, the new chronology of the fact that 1,000 years has been missing and blah, blah, blah. He's claiming that it's very likely that Moscow is the original Jerusalem. I'm not sure that I agree with him with that, but that just shows how far out everything is. You know, things are not what they seem. And even when you look at the old maps of the world, you look at maps of the world from circa 1500 and stuff, and they've got New Guinea on the map, but they don't have Australia on the map. And yet you can see Australia from New Guinea, and they've got just an area there called Australis Incognita. Incognita. It's not. So they know it's there. We're just not telling you it's there. It's hidden. It's incognito. They tell you on the maps that they know what's going on. Yeah. So, and I wonder what happened here in Australia. Well, what they did to this place, because this place has been turned into a desert, and it's not naturally like this. I mean, there was something major in the centre of this country that was taken out. I think how they did it, that's another question. You know, whether it was natural, whether it's technology, how they did it. We can speculate all this stuff all day. And that's the thing with all these things. When you bring this type of information to people, they want answers. Oh, there was a mud flood. How was there a mud flood? Well, we don't know. We just know that there's evidence that there was this flood that's gone across most of the world. Not everywhere was affected, but 90% of the place was affected.
Which is massive.
You know, not every... It's massive. It's huge, you know. So why isn't it in the history books? Why do these old maps exist showing California as an island? Why do these old maps exist showing Hyperborea, showing 4 land masses at the North Pole? Why is there maps showing Friesland? All of these things that aren't there now. Why are they there? And why isn't any knowledge of this in our history books? You know, we don't get taught anything at school anymore. We get taught how to operate computers and how to be a good little cog in the big machine. You don't taught anything about reality anymore. And there's a reason for that. And nothing is what it seems. This world is very, very different to what people believe it is.
Well, it's a sign of massive intelligence to be able to hold all of these little pieces of information in one place and not necessarily jump to an answer or need like the definitive, conclusion to it all. Like that's part of thinking, being a thinking human. So I think it's a testament to how much we've been dumbed down that people want that immediately and can't kind of explore it on their own without jumping to that.
Yeah, it's a program. People want the answer. They think they can, if there's a question, oh well, I'll just turn to the back of the book and get the answer.
Yeah.
No, we're still figuring this out. We're still figuring it out. And we don't have anything to go on. We don't have any reliable sources to go on. It doesn't matter what you read, you don't know how reliable it is. All you
Right.
can really judge by is what you can experience yourself and what you can find out yourself and the physical evidence that exists all around us. I mean,
Amen.
sure, there's probably some books that are true. It has to
Yeah.
be. But in regard to mainstream history, none of it is supported by physical evidence. None of it.
I come to that over and over again myself, and I keep questioning things that I would have thought. I used to always say I question everything, and now I'm like, no, I really didn't. And some of the things I'm questioning now blow my own mind. But I do. I think it's a good practice to question everything anyway, because it's amazing how totally they can erase something. And it kind of worries me that I think you were talking about this recently, that we have so much digitization of everything now, because that's going to be even easier to edit, change, delete, completely
Yeah,
eradicate.
yeah, and it removes our access to it as well. I mean, they can just switch off the power. If all the books are digital and you do something wrong, you have a political opinion they don't like, and they lock you out of the internet, well, then you don't have access to that information.
Right.
And once it's all run by Amazon, then Amazon decides if your book is truth, you
Hmm.
know, and so it decides whether or not you'll get published or not, you know, and who can get access to it. That's the thing. And we're losing our life skills. All the libraries are disappearing, even though a lot of the books are probably false anyway. There was probably true ones in there, and
Right.
all the libraries are disappearing. It's all becoming digitized. And this is how they burn the knowledge. This is how they burn books. When they first started all these digital readers, the first one was called Kindle.
Yeah. Oh
You,
yeah.
you start a fire,
Kindle.
and then now you've got Amazon Fire that you use to read. Yeah.
Wow, they don't even
So
hide anything, do they?
yeah, yeah, they're burning the knowledge. This is the next book burning. This is what they're doing. They're burning all the knowledge by digitizing it all. And people are being taught they don't even need to write anymore. They can just use their typewriters. So kids are being taught they don't even need to learn how to write. You don't need to learn how to spell. The spell checker will fix that up for you. You don't need to learn how to think. The little personal assistants will do all that for you. So then they get everybody completely dependent upon this system, and they just lock them out of it.
Yeah.
Once it's all digital and the AI controls everything, controls the electrical grid, controls everybody's finances, controls everybody's knowledge, and then they just get shut out.
Yep.
What's the world going to do? The world would implode. People won't know how to get food to their shops because the digital whatever on their computer isn't working. They don't know they can just get in their car and go there and drive their
Yeah.
truck and load it up and bring it back, and they can still pass paper around to each other if they want to give it value.
Right.
They don't need all of this other stuff. It's like when there's a financial crash, suddenly, oh, look, the dollar's not worth anything. So you're going to have to take a supermarket, a wheelbarrow full of dollars to the shop to get a loaf of bread. Well, how is it worth anything yesterday if now you just decided to switch the value off?
Right.
Well, great. That means it wasn't worth anything yesterday either.
Yeah, we can
But we
still
can,
keep playing
if
the
we want to
game.
use it, yeah, if we want to use it as a medium of trade, we can still pass it around to each other. It doesn't matter what you say it's worth because it's not
No.
worth anything anyway. It's just paper,
Yeah.
So, but people can't understand it, they can't see how simple that is, that they can just switch the value of money on and off. How can they do that if it actually has any value to begin with,
Right.
you know? And
Well,
people
that's
just
what
don't think that it's just too simple for them. It's too obvious, the most obvious truth that they just can't see because it's right in their face.
it's the same with Bitcoin. And people were like, well, how does it have value? It's just a thing in the like digital world or whatever. I'm like, how does anything have value? We agree that it does, and so it does. That's all it takes.
Exactly. That's all it takes. That's how Bitcoin had any value at all. That's
Right.
how anything has any value, just because we agree that it has value.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that, because that actually gives us more power. Like you're saying, if there is a financial collapse, we can do anything we want with that. If we want to keep trading with each other, if we want to develop some other method of currency, we can do that. And I feel like a while ago there was a kind of more prominent movement to create localized currencies. And I was seeing it, I want to say it was around 2000 or so, and I don't hear about that ever anymore. But that's probably a better way to do it, because then you're not controlled from the outside. You know, if your city has a currency that they're using, then everyone can keep using that no matter what happens.
Well, yeah, it'd be nice to get to a point where we don't need currency at all. Nice to get back to a point where, and if we had free energy, we wouldn't need currency. We wouldn't need, because you only need money to pay for energy, really.
That's a good point.
I mean, to power your house, to cook your food, to move your car, and all this sort of stuff. If it was free,
grow your food,
you'd be free. You'd have time. You wouldn't have to go and work a job you hate in order to collect the paper you need to pay for the cost of running your life. All of that cost would be free, and so you'd have time to pursue artistic pursuits to grow your own food. You have community gardens and all sorts of stuff. There'd be no need for currency. Free energy would eliminate all of that. It's only because of energy and the need for energy, and the fact that energy is metered and has an economic value put on it, that we even need money to begin with.
Right.
So, that's the tricky thing.
Do you think that's the other, because the energy control is a part of it, and I think also another part, because you can kind of get off the grid if you want, right? You can have solar power and you can hunt and you can grow your food and you can do whatever, but if the environment is degraded enough, then you're not able to do that necessarily either. And do you think that has anything to do with why they seem to be intentionally degrading the environment? Or do you think that they are?
Well, they're degrading the environment so that we can't live off it. We can't survive if we leave the cities. We have to be dependent upon their system, their grid, their control grid. And all of the stuff you said there about whatever. If the energy was free, you wouldn't. I mean, driving your car and all the things that you just say you've still got to do this. You wouldn't need currency if your car was running off ethereal energy. You just get in it and drive it for as long as you want to drive, anywhere you want to drive. I mean, what do you need to be destroying the planet for? Most of the destruction we're putting out on the planet is again for energy, biofuel, or for this or for that, or mines or whatever, to feed the starving masses, because the starving masses can't feed themselves because they're too busy running on the treadmill doing all this stuff, which is completely meaningless, which is all about just collecting enough credits to be able to pay for energy.
True.
So it all comes back to the same thing. It really does. If we had, if your house was could function through ethereal energy, and we wouldn't need all the energy that we're using now. It's this whole nightlife style of living as well. The night clubbing and the nightlife is the beautiful thing. We really should be going to sleep when it gets dark and waking up when it gets light. Really, I mean, this is the way it should be. Totally. People might totally hate that idea, but I mean, I get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, because the sun's starting to come up, and I'm awake I'm awake as soon as it's starting to get light. I'm awake, and then as soon as it starts to get dark, like 7:30, I'm tired and I want to go to bed.
It's true. If you go, if I go camping for like 3 days, by the end of it, I'm like set to that cycle. Like the sun's going down, I'm getting tired. When the sun comes up, I wake up. Yeah. I don't feel groggy. I feel good.
But all of this nightlife style of things, it gets us out there in that horrible fake light, which is bad for our health. All of this LED lighting that we're subject to, all this loud music, flashing lights, drinking alcohol, all this bad stuff.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, and it seems like, wow, that's what life is about though, to a lot of people. But it never was like that. It never was like that. If we were living in these Vedic type of cultures and we had free energy and we were experimenting on what we could create and being artistic, I mean, think what we could do. We wouldn't want that. We wouldn't even enjoy that. That would be like, that's what
chaos.
The people with no creative skills do.
Yeah.
Because they're so disconnected with reality that they go out and enjoy all this superficial bullshit, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
We've been, that's how far disconnected we are from what it means to be human.
For real.
And but even getting yourself in that lifestyle where you're awake in the daylight and sleeping at nighttime, it's much better for you. Then you're not subject to all of this artificial light, which is so bad for us. Yeah. It attacks us on so many levels. That's one of the ways people don't even realize they're being attacked is through light.
Yeah.
Attacked through sound, through light, through food, through vaccinations, through every single thing they can think of to attack us. So, we've got to get back in touch with what we are. That's how to get out of this system. I've been saying, one day of the world not spending money would would change the whole world. Imagine if everyone stayed home and didn't spend money for a day. The whole finance, what would Wall Street do? It'd freak out. If the figures didn't move, you'd have these guys sitting there on the stock floors having meltdowns. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves because they didn't have anything to write in their book, nothing to click, The stock market just isn't moving. No one's buying anything. All the transport stops. Everyone just stays home for a day. It'd send a shockwave around the entire world. You'd change the world with one day of non-compliance because it would inspire everyone to do it more, And I've been suggesting this for the last 10 years. That's how to change the world. Stop complying with your own slavery and realize that we are the ones holding this whole thing up, and it's all fiction, all of it.
I love it. And getting more in touch with yourself and who you really are, I feel like, is what is empowering in order for you to be able to do that, Because I feel like people are just so disconnected, like you're saying. We have these lights, we have everything all around us that they just forget, like, who are you? What are you here for?
That's the key to the whole thing, knowing who and what you are. It was something I've said for 10 years as well. Once you know that, you see the fiction for what it is. You can't help but see it because once you know yourself, you can see the fiction. And if people did that, the world would change. The world would change in an instant if people just suddenly had this epiphany and went, wow, I actually have value, and realize what they are, realize what it means to be human.
Right.
But they're so caught up in this maze and this fog, they're just walking around like drones. I think a lot of the people here are just empty portals. They're like corn flour in stew. They're just there to fill up the space. So the people who are awake have all this stuff we've got to buffer through to try to, because some people you try to talk to them, they're just blank. They're just blank slates. Lady next door, it's like talking to a flat tire. Honestly, it's just, she's like a flat tire. It doesn't matter what you say to her. She's, nothing. There's just nothing there. And I can't dislike her or anything. She's a lovely person, but there's just nobody home.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of people are like that. And I think a lot of that, I mean, maybe it's part of our test. Maybe this is all a holographic dream. Who knows what we're doing here? It's what you do with it. It's what you do with the whole thing. I think we're going to come through this. I really are. No matter how much they try to make it so negative and lock it down, 5G, all the stuff they're doing, they can't stop this awakening that's happening.
I don't think
the wave
they can
is
either.
building and building and building. And this Tartarian information, the false history information that's coming out now, this is uniting everybody.
Yeah.
And it's really inspiring everybody. It's so obvious because it's right around you. It's in your own city. You can go and find these buildings in your own city. It doesn't matter what country you're in.
Right.
I guarantee that these buildings are there. So this is massively inspiring for people. So I think it's a hell of a good time to be alive.
I agree. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think people are waking up, and I don't think you can stop it. And I like that point you're making, that there are a lot of people who are just kind of turned off or asleep, and it fits with that NPC meme that's going on. And I wonder if there just are a bunch of filler people who are there. And maybe I want to think that every single being can wake up and come to terms with this all, but I don't actually know if that's true.
We don't need everybody to. We don't need everybody to. We just need the people who are awake to get some focus and to get some unity with each other. I mean, agree to think differently, agree to have different belief systems. If you want to have a belief system, fine, but don't inflict it on others and don't hate them if they believe something different, because we're all facing a common foe here, and ultimately nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going on. Everything's a lie. All the information we've got, we don't even know how true it is, all the stuff we've been researching. So if you've been reading books and reading reports, we don't even know how true these CIA reports are, these documents, these leaked. Why are they getting leaked right now?
Right. They could be placed easily.
Even all the Tartarian information, why is it coming out right now? So I mean, I remember seeing it on maps when I was a kid. I remember my father had this old wooden globe. He had this old wooden globe that looked really rustic, and it had this place on it, Tartaria. And I just thought, just a made-up globe, when I was a kid. But it was there. So, but you've got to question all of it. And I put out a show recently, Everything is a Lie, and I basically pointed out that, look, nobody knows anything. And we have to, that's the only thing you can really know is how much you don't know.
True.
Because everything is wrong. All we know is that everything's wrong. Like what I was saying about Syria and England and Ulysses and Tartaria and all that. All we know is that we don't know. We know this was there, but we don't know what happened. We don't know what caused the mud flood. We don't know what happened to Tartaria. We don't know that that's what the Napoleonic War was all about. All we can do is look at it and try to put the pieces together and realize that we're only going to put it together by looking at physical evidence and listening to oral traditions, not listening to what's written in the history books, because all the history has been falsified. So, you can prove it's anybody you want who's doing all this. As I've often said, you can prove it. I could, give me a day, I'll present a presentation for you. I'll get a slideshow, I'll get up and do a talk, and you tell me who you want to believe it is, and I can create a presentation to convince you that you're right.
Right.
Because all the information is put out there for me to do so. Doesn't mean any of it is true.
True.
So you've got to look at that and realize that what people are presenting you in this so-called truth movement is what information they've had access to, what they've been able to make of it. But there might be a whole bunch of other stuff they haven't had access to. And if they've developed a belief system along the way, then they've been looking for stuff to reinforce that, to present it out there to say, hey, I've got the answer. Because their ego's got in the way.
Yeah.
And too many people have got too much of a vested interest because they've spent their whole life in looking into ETs or looking into the Dome project or the Bell project or the this project or the that project. And so they've got a vested interest in that being what the answer is, when really it's just a piece of the puzzle. It's all just a piece of the puzzle. And ultimately, we just don't know. And we're never going to know until we establish freedom. But we've got a real opportunity for that now. And that's a beautiful thing. So if we can put all this stuff down, get a little bit of unity of focus and realize that all these mysteries exist because the world's run by criminals. So let's deal with that. And then the answers will present themselves by default.
Well, I like what you said, that it's what you do with it too, because we can't know for sure what is true or what is real, but we can know in each moment if what we're doing is good or not, and if we should be allowing something to happen or not allowing it to happen, giving our energy to it or not. And that, I think, is our power as well.
Yeah, and a lot of people go into this this research and this truth activism, whatever you want to call it. They have this idea of enlightenment, secret knowledge, all this sort of stuff. This place they're going to get to where they're going to be this all wise, all powerful, all knowing, whatever. And I don't realize that place doesn't exist. That place that we think we're getting to when we start on this journey of spiritual enlightenment or whatever, and we think we end up as this guru or something, it doesn't exist. It's a place that we're searching for that we never ever get to. And the place is the journey to the place. That is the place. The journey is the place. It's like Castaneda called the journey to Ixtlan, which is the journey of your life to knowledge. And it's the knowledge you accumulate through that journey, which is the place. So you're in the place already, you're just not aware of it. It's like John Lennon said, life is what happens while you're planning other things. And that's the way it is. The journey is the place. So people forget that. They want to get to that place and be there without having to make the journey. And one cannot exist without the other. So that's an important thing for people to understand. And if you adopt a belief system along the way, if you start saying this is, and then you start looking for stuff to reinforce that belief system, I won't look at that because that doesn't agree with my belief system. You're missing out. You don't know. You don't know. Belief is the enemy of knowledge, and life is a path to knowledge. So you don't want to be adopting beliefs along the way. You want to let it unfold, and then you won't have to believe anything because you'll know. Belief doesn't, knowledge doesn't require belief in anything. It just is,
That's beautiful words of wisdom. So I wanted to ask you what this ether energy that you're talking about with Tartaria, do you think that's something we could recreate again?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And do you think
how?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what we refer to as Tesla technology is what it is. But I even question the existence of Tesla, whether he was what we're told he is, because there's every evidence that this free energy was everywhere. It wasn't just this one guy who had this great mind who could do these things. And if it was everywhere and they tried to cover it up, you can see that it would be necessary to create someone like Tesla just to explain away all this stuff that still exists around the planet. Oh, there was just this guy who did this thing, and wow, wasn't he amazing, But, I think we can get back to it. It's just, in fact, I think people still know how to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if the British royal family is still living in free energy. I wouldn't be surprised if the palace generates free energy, and they know it, and they use it. And, the rulers, the people who control this matrix, have probably still got access to all this stuff. I wouldn't even be surprised if a lot of the energy we're using now is actually created free. It isn't from coal-fired gas-fired power stations at all. They're just doing that to pollute the environment.
Right.
You know, a lot of it could be running from buildings anyway. That's just piped down to our houses, and you know, they've got to use wires because they don't want to give us the receivers that we would need to pick it up. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm just speculating, but it wouldn't be surprised if it's still in use now and people actually know how to do it. You know,
that's a really good point. All right. Well, you already gave some really good advice, but I was wondering if you have any more advice you would give to people who are trying to live their best life and live it truly and well.
Yeah, well, just do that and live your best life and live it truly well, you know, and try to be the change you want to see in the world. You know, that's one great thing that Gandhi said, whether you believe he was a politician or what, but that's one great thing that he did say, be the change that you want to see in the world. And that's what everyone should do, you know, be a shining light to your community. And people need to see that you're better and more empowered and more at peace with yourself because you have this information and this knowledge. They want to hear some rabid conspiracy theorist standing on the corner with a megaphone screaming out that the sky is falling.
Right.
Even if it is. You got to present it to them as an opportunity because there's opportunity in all crisis. You know, the Chinese word for crisis and opportunity is interchangeable. It's the same word.
That's cool.
You know, that should be a lesson for everybody, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we can make a difference by simply being who and what we are. Once you understand your humanity and understand what you are and realize no one has any right of ownership over you, and you simply question them in the right way, in a peaceful, empowering, you know, eloquent way, they have no recourse. They have nowhere to go from that point. So, you know, we could unite and help the people around us, and we could stand up against the system and change the world in a day. You know, our big problem is that we've been taught to be divided from our communities, taught to be, you know, at war with our neighbours and at war with the people around us. So, you know, everybody's against each other, and no one's facing the problem, which has caused the hardship to begin with, which has put them in this state of animosity towards each other. It's all contrived. The whole thing is a scam, you know. So, you know, that's the best thing people can do. Be a shining light in your own community, and don't have any stake in the outcome. You know, you're only here for a breath. You're only here for a little while. If the human race destroys itself, well, you know, I did my best. I could see a better way, and I suggested other things.
Right.
You know, if the experiment fails, the experiment fails. It doesn't matter to me. I won't be here. You know, so why are you worried about it, really? You know, just try to make things better. Try to leave a footprint from being here. Try to leave breadcrumbs for the next time you come back, if you're going to come back.
Yeah.
You know, try to leave the world a better place than how you found it. Do that, and you'll make a difference. And that's really all you can do. You know, so don't be too hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up, and don't beat the human race up over this. Everyone does what they've done because they're programmed. Right. Even with the whole Jewish question and what Israel's doing and stuff. If you really want to look at mind control, the Jewish people are the first people who were put under mind control. So how can you hate them for it?
Right.
You know, for what they do, they're programmed to do what they do. You can't hate them as people. Anybody would do that. If you were born into that situation, I guarantee you'd be doing the same thing because you'd be subject to the same software that's been put into the mechanism, and that's the program that you're running. You know, it's just that's the operating system that you've got. So you can't blame them for it. You know, you can't blame anybody for what they do. You know, because everybody has been manipulated. Everybody has been put under mind control. Like everybody has been put under mind control. It's very rare that there's someone who hasn't. That's someone who doesn't take to. Like me when I was 4, or other people there's people like us who just see it when we're kids and go, holy fuck, what is this? You know?
I'm never going that way.
I'm not doing this shit, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's some people that it just doesn't take, you know, but honestly, you cannot blame people for anything that they do. It's all a program, and it's all the result of programming. The whole world is under my control. Let's just stop. Let's just stop, regroup, agree to disagree, and move forward in another direction now. That would change everything. Just the decision to do that. And stop thinking we need governments. We don't. It's just racketeering. We don't need these people at all.
That's a false dependency that we've been programmed with as well, but thinking that we need that.
New parents. We leave our parents. We want new parents. The government will look after them. I want to be free, but I don't want to have any responsibility for myself. How does that work?
That's an oxymoron, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's tell everybody where they can find more of you, since you're such an amazingly wise, beautiful person.
Oh, thank you, darling. Thank you for saying that. I'm not I'm just an average person. Anybody can do this. That's the whole point. You know, you don't have to be someone. You just got to
I
be
agree.
prepared to speak.
That's like half my
You
mission
can
is
find out.
to let people know how important they are and how they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, you can find everything about me at thecrowhouse.com. That's my website, thecrowhouse.com. You'll find links to my Facebook pages, my YouTube page, all that stuff there. It's all for free. There's no subscriber section on the Crow House. There's over 2,000 pages on that website now. It's ridiculously huge. It's an old HTML website, so deal with it. I'm not updating it to WordPress. It's not going on the cloud. It exists on my hard drive, and that's where it's staying.
It's probably safer.
And, yeah, and that's just the way it is. But it's all free, and there's buckets of information there. There's 10 years of me doing radio shows and interviews like this, and just a lot of information. So share it with people and use it yourself, and enjoy.
Hey, that's awesome. Thank you so much. So, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to the true soul, Max Igan. Max, thank you from the depths of my soul for being here today.
My pleasure, darling. Happy to come on and chat to you anytime. Good conversation.
Thank you. A truth is only hard to hear or bear when it is born alone, friends, and that is exactly why we come together to share and connect. Like Leah and Chloe of Rising Appalachia say, we know our might is tenfold in connection. We are all interwoven nodes in a network that we fabricate every moment of every day, and we all face the same struggles, joys, and wonders. And I'm so grateful to walk this path with all of you. As always, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.